This is a short.
Is why the car is sitting on an angle the way it is now. We're going to show you what happened, why it happened, and what we're going to have to do to try and fix that. Okay, Chris, if you bring your camera over here to the passenger door. Okay, we can see here on the door how the door has been hitting the locking mechanism. Okay, this has been doing this for a while. And when we go to shut it, it won't close because what's happened is the car is sagged or sunk in the middle. Okay, this is caused usually by a chassis fatigue or a chassis problem. When I examined the car earlier, we found one of the things that may be causing this, and we'll get into that in a second. One of the other problems that's occurred is the rear spring section. Chris, if we just...
Yep. Let's just... There we go.
Okay. We can see here that the spring shackle is in an upward position there, as well as they're not being supported properly in through here, as well as at the front here. Same problem again. Okay,
right.
Now what happens is, in theory, this spring is longer than the other side. This is one of the problems why the car sits so low on the right-hand side. Now, if we look upward to the top of the wheel arch here, you can see how the rear end has been coming up and hitting this area and has virtually bashed it in, okay, as well as bowed out your inner wheel arch area. It is arched outward, and when we get that all sandblasted, you'll find that we're going to have to straighten all that up. Now, one of the other things that has happened, as we can see down inside here, along in here, it has been patched. Okay. Now, this usually indicates, as well as along in here, that this section of the wheel arch is usually rotted out. What I'll do is I'll show you a section in a second that shows you exactly what this looks like when it is rotted out and sandblasted clean, so you can see it. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, now this is a panel that is similar to the one that's in your car, and this is the same section that you were just looking at. We've cut it out of another car, but this is virtually what you would see once you sandblast the panel clean. You can see how it's been all repaired up through here, okay, and patched up along here. And the patch that I showed you towards the inner part of the fender was up in here. All that normally rots away, and it's been patched once before and tarred over, and now what has to happen is we're going to cut all that out and rebuild it. Okay?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, now if we look on the left side of the car, we can see again that they've done the patching. It comes across here and up along the top there and around the corner. This patch was pop riveted in, which is not very good at all. It really doesn't give it any strength. It just more or less sits there. As you can see, it's not really even attached. When we go back up around the
yeah, I'm going to have to move Martin, I think.
And the rear end has been hitting, they call these bump boxes, and the reason they call that's obvious, when the rear end bumps into them, and this is the type of damage it will do when your springs are not in proper condition. Okay, and we can see here as well another repair just beyond the bump box. Now I'm going to take you over to the rear leaf spring on this thing. Okay, we can see here that the shackle is pointed forward, okay, and we also can see that the spring thickness is a little thicker on this side than on the other, as well as this section of the spring right here should be rolled all the way around. If you just stop the camera for a second, we'll go over to the other side, show the difference, then I will show you what a new spring looks like. No, one. Okay, now here we are on the right side. There's the shackle that I was talking about. We can see how it is more in an upright position. This would make the spring probably about 1 inch to 2 inches longer on this side than the other side. as well as we can see this top spring here, how it bands around and then goes around the shackle bushing to support that bushing and keep it in line. Okay, Chris, now we're going to go and get a new spring and show how a new spring looks.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, this is a new spring here. First off, we can see how at the end, or the spring eye, is brought and curled all the way around. Inside that hollow area, there's a rubber bushing where your shackle attaches to. Okay, that's one of the differences. This is a bit better spring than the one that you have in there. Now, if we look down here, we can see how the springs are band together. Okay, they do this so that the spring works in unison with itself and gives you a better controlled ride. Okay. Now, on the replacement springs that we use, the spring thickness is just a little bit more than the original, so they go to less leafs, but the longevity of the spring is much better. They seem to last a lot longer, and the ride on them is very reasonable.
Rolling.
Okay, here we are on the left side of the car. We can see how the door overlaps the rear fender again. Now, it's not as bad as on the right side, but I think that's just due basically to blind luck on the person who did the repair on this side. The car has sagged in the center. It's not as great on this side as the other side, but the problem is there, and we're still back into the structure of the car. And in the next few minutes, we're going to show you exactly what happened underneath the car to cause a lot of these problems.
We're rolling. Speed.
The car's flexing a lot. You're going to get body cracking like this is an example here. Not only is it cracked at the top, and I realize that there's a lot of paint and a lot of filler in it, but there is also a welded seam that runs across here, which joins this panel to this panel. Now, the front shroud is welded in 4 or 5 different spots, and what happens is you are stressing the area where the weld is. Now, I'm going to give Chris a second to zoom in on that, and then I want to show you some cracking on the front of the shroud, which is caused by the same problems.
I'm afraid our macro doesn't work.
Okay, now here again we can see a sample of what happens due to the flexing and the twisting of the car. We can see here how the shroud is beginning to crack, and if Chris shuts off his light...
Yeah, you can see it where that light's.
Okay. Now if I had to put my trouble light in behind there, that might help it a bit. Okay, now we're going to go to the bottom of the car, underneath the car here, and we're going to see exactly why all this stuff is happening and what happened when the car was repaired. Okay, now we're underneath the car on the right side, and this here is a shot of the front inner sill. Now you can see here how the inner sill has been all rotted out. Okay, this is part of the support for the chassis. Okay, now they've done the repair up until or just beyond the right front outrigger, but it is not tied in at all to the sill, so therefore you have no real support. One of the other things that they did is we can see here the lower edge of the right front floor pan, and bolted to it is your master cylinder brake booster. And if I push forward here, you can see how it moves. They didn't even bother to weld it back down to the floor pan, and through vibration and that, you stand a pretty good chance of possibly breaking a brake line. Okay, Chris? Just beyond that, we're seeing the inner sill. You can see at the front here how it's all rotted out. Okay, and it carries all the way back to the rear outrigger. Okay, this panel has to be this panel has to be tied in to both sills because this offers part of the strength for the rest of the structure. And because it's not, what it's done is it's just added to the problem of the chassis sagging, and unfortunately now that the chassis has had its damage, so to speak, there's really no turning back. We're going to have to deal with this problem as well as the others that we've discussed earlier. Okay, now we're still at the right front outrigger, and what I want to show you is exactly what happened when they welded this section of the outrigger in. We can see here, just forward of it, they've added a patch or a piece. Normally what happens to these outriggers is this section here gathers moisture and dirt, and in behind here it has a tendency to rot this section of the rail, but in behind this box. So what they've done is they've had to add a piece to it because it's been all fatigued. Now when they did that and ran their bead down that way, this is what happened to the car. We can see here, I don't know how well the video will show it, but this here area of the chassis has now been buckled. This is where the chassis sagged when they did that repair, and we can see down under here how it's been all damaged, and then if we look across you can actually, the chassis has a very slight arch to it. Okay, one of the other things I noticed is the end of the outrigger is not capped. Now what happens is this fills up with dirt again, and eventually you've got your rail rotted out again. It makes the rail weaker, and just recreates the problem that you just finished fixing.
We should just put it at that where the actual
Right
crack
there.
is. There we go. Okay.
Right in there. Okay, so that's that should have been capped. Okay.
Right. And yeah.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, we can see back in here that we've got quite a bit of damage. I don't know if you've hit something or if someone has pried against it trying to do a transmission repair. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but it took a fair hit. And if we come over to the right rail again, in this repaired section, we also have a bow in this area here. Now, I don't know if we can see it, if Chris sights down the rail, if you can see where the chassis has been sucked in and out.
Well, we'll try.
I wanted to point out was the oil pan. I guess there's a lot of rocks where you are, or something, because we can see here how it's been all smashed in at the back of the pan here. It's been hit very hard at the front. Hopefully it hasn't disturbed the oil pickup at all. I think if we do the repair here, we should maybe pull that pan off and try and straighten it, or try and see if we can get another oil pan for you. Okay, Chris. Was the wiring harness that runs underneath the car. We can see here how the covering has come off. Now that's very common on these because the harness is on the exterior of the car. One of the things that we strongly recommend when redoing the cars is putting a new harness in. This way you hopefully no longer have the electrical problems that you had when you first brought it in. And the other thing is, of course, we can see here that your exhaust system has really been hitting out at the bottom. This is partly because of the suspension at the back, and the system is not really hung properly. Again, with the new chassis, we have a tendency to have the ability to hang the exhaust system a little higher, and you don't have the same problems as you're having now with it. One of the problems with the exhaust system being bashed in like this is it hampers the exhaust flow, and actually it hurts the performance of the engine, and it becomes very hard on the valve train. This is something that we should also deal with when we do the restoration.
You get overheating as well, don't you?
Yeah, the car will have a tendency to run a little warmer.
Okay.
Out of the trunk pan, we can see here how it's just been deteriorated away and patched over top. One of the things that I've noticed about the car is it seems to have a lot of undercoating on it. It was probably not a good idea to do this, because what the undercoating does is trap the moisture between the tar and the panel, and eventually it just rots the panel out. A lot of people have realized now that Z-barding is more detrimental than beneficial to the preservation of the car. All right, from here we're going to go under the hood. There's a few things I want to show you there, and then I'm going to show you some of the repairs that we do on a similar car as this one, and the way the repairs should have been done when you had them done at the time. When I was checking through the car, was that your water pump, the top bearing is gone, and as you can see here, we can take the pump and move it around. Now this is going to have to be replaced. You can't leave it like that. It's just going to either come apart and go into your radiator, or you're going to continue to overheat or lose all your coolant. I also noticed that the lower rad hose was changed, and we no longer have the heater hose connected to the radiator hose. This is something that we should reconnect, because what happens is your heater stays dry, and then when you do finally go to reconnect it, you may find that it leaks.
1, 2.
With the camera, but the bottom pulley on the engine is very close to the cross brace of the two front suspension towers. When this happens, it's usually an indication that because the chassis has sunk in the middle, it has a tendency to want to push the motor forward. Now, one of the problems with this is now the engine is trying to support the car, and the second problem is because the pulley is so close to the tower brace, it becomes very difficult to change your fan belt. So this is another indication of the structure showing its fatigue.
And
I was just speaking of on a new chassis. And what happens is your pulley is down in this area here, and because the chassis is sagged in the center, the pulley is now about there. Now normally it sits way back here, and because it is that close, it's like I said earlier, you can't get your fan belt off, but it isn't a definite indication that there's a problem. Notice when the car came in, what we normally do is we check to see if any of the components are not working, and we'd like to determine which of the components are working. We can see here, down up on this box here, this is what they call the brake light, signal light relay switch. And what happens is when you put your brake lights on, it cancels out and still allows the signal light to work. Yours is not working. Now there's supposed to be a cover over top of that, and I don't know if I can fix and reset that or if I have to replace it. If it has to be replaced, it will run you about $250 for the component. Very, very expensive. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But without it, the car would not pass a mechanical fitness, and you have to be able to have all the indicator lights and that operational. We can see that the engine bay has been all painted one color, black. It's very, very common, but some of the problems with this is you also get paint on all the joints and in all the joints. Now what happens is it promotes wiring problems because it interferes with the contact of the wire to each plug and each joint, as well as the solvents in the paint. When they get onto the plastic harnesses, they have a tendency to make the wires hard, and eventually they crack, and you have more electrical problems. If we were to redo the car, this area here would be painted in the same color as the body color, and then all the electrical components would be cleaned up, and they wouldn't be painted. They would be in a natural state the way they should be, so that it helps them work a little bit better. This is on the left side of the car. This is what they call a radius arm box. What this does is there's an arm that goes from the rear end to this box, and what happens is this arm prevents what they call spring windup. Now, spring windup is when you accelerate and the spring wants to take an S-shaped pattern. Well, this radius arm prevents that. So what's important is that this box is tied in good and strong, but we can see back in here where they haven't welded it to anything. Okay, and what they've done is they've tried to block all the holes, but they haven't made the panel strong at all. So it really hasn't resolved any problems, and we still have the hole there. So this here would all have to be taken.
Where we are.
Okay, now this is on the same side of a car that we're doing now, the left side again. And we can see here we've put a new pan in, okay, and we've built a new torque box. Now once this is all tied in, spot welded in the way it should be, and stitch weld along the wheel arch, this will all be seam sealed and made watertight, as well as strong. Now, earlier we talked about your inner sills and the strength dealing with the sill and where they hadn't welded it to the outrigger. These panels here, or these bars or channels, are what we call outriggers. What they do is they extend out from the main chassis rail to support the outer part of the car, or the body. Now you can see here how they're welded all the way in, okay, here and across the front, as well as sticking forward about 17 inches. Now what happens is your fender bolts to this panel. Now on your car, from this point forward is now, well, the whole panel is rotted out, but from this point forward it is virtually non-existent. And what they've done is they've gone and welded the fender to the front inner wheel arch. And left this all vacant. Now this adds to the structural strength of the car, and this is very, very important that this is tied in properly, because if it isn't, you're going to have other problems. But this is what it should look like when it's installed properly. And then after you do that, you would then take your new floor pan, which is stamped properly. It locks in, sits in on the rail. Okay, then it is stitch welded in position and repaired properly. Okay, the front floor pans are then repaired. Okay, I'm not a very big believer in putting in small patch panels. If a section is rotted 3 inches up, I would prefer to change the whole area, and that way the problem usually doesn't come back and haunt you for a great many years. It's a procedure that I have pretty much lived by, and I've had a great success with. Okay, we can the ways that you can check this is we can see how the door is hitting the whole catch assembly. Now if we were to jack this up, let's get some of the weight off it. Okay. Now we've opened that door gap up almost 1/8 of an inch. Well, more than 1/8 of an inch, closer to 1/4 of an inch. And it's still brushing. Okay, but now we can close the door. But the door is still having a tendency to hang low. The car has sunk, my estimation is about 1/2 an inch to 3/4 of an inch. It's unfortunate, but now the car has to, we've got to start over to correct these problems. We're taking a look at the interior here. We can see that it needs carpets, and new vinyl and new leather. We have discussed this, so there's really not really any necessity to talk about this at great deals. I would like to show you the 2 front seat pans though, and the cushions, because we are definitely going to have to replace them. A couple of things. Okay, one of the problems is that the seat pans have a tendency to crack and break. When that happens, it just starts to chew the cushion out, and the cushion has no more density to it. So it's like sitting on the bare pan itself. My recommendation is that when we do the interior, we change the pan and the cushion so that your seats will feel as they should, like a new seat. Because of the cost of the leather interior and that, I think it would probably be a very good way to go on it. Okay, now what we'd like to do is show you a car that we have finished a structural repair on. This is not an uncommon example. This is the way we do them all. They're finished as well underneath as they are on the exterior of the car. It is my belief that it takes no more effort to do it right the first time, and it certainly is a lot cheaper to do it right the first time than it is to continue to patch and repair. Because we do this type of work and to this standard, we have managed to retain the value of the cars without any problem. Now I'm going to let Chris just shoot the car, and it'll give you an idea of what you should and will get if you choose to go with us on this project. So if you're going to take a shot, shoot the engine bay.
Yeah, we'll shoot it all. We're rolling.
Okay, there's a shot of the engine bay. This is the way I believe that they should be finished, to the same color as the exterior of the car. You don't see any tar, you don't see any black spray bomb and aerosol paints, just a good clean restoration.
Okay, so this shot shows you.
This shot, well, you can see how straight and true the chassis is, and this is where our product has prevailed. The chassis is geometrically and dimensionally correct, and it offers a better ride. The car steers better, it handles better, it offers less fatigue to the upper structure. And like I said earlier, it's an end solution. It's the way to fix the car and resolve all you're showing you today. Helps you to understand what has happened to the car. In a lot of situations, what has happened is not uncommon. The us and Healey's are prone to chassis problems, fatigue cracks, door gaps closing in on you. And these are all structurally related problems, which I think we've shown you today. And I think if we look at restoring the car, we have to go beyond just trying to paint it and put an interior in it. It is a short-term cosmetic repair. It is still costly, and you're going to end up having the same problems again in the very short term. So it might be best at this time to consider your options. If we can help you at all in any further information, we'd be glad to. And after you get all the information and you've had a chance to mull it over, give me a call and